our son Jonathan, he was assigned to work in Germany for a long-term assignment. So he and his wife Sarah, and at the time their 3 little girls, they all relocated to Munich for about 6 months. And at some point, my husband and I looked at each other and we said, if we don't go visit them while they're there, we're going to regret it. So we got online, we bought our tickets, and soon there we were in Munich. And Munich, if you've ever been there, it's a beautiful city. It's ancient, and it's got great food, and it's got nice museums. And of course, there were the 3 granddaughters to read stories to and to play with. So it was really fun. But while we were there for about 10 days, we traveled up to Frankfurt. And then it was kind of funny because we traveled a little bit further than that because they were having a church picnic at, get this, Frankenstein's castle. Because why not, right? And it turned out it was really a nice place for a picnic. And apparently also lots of people thought it would be a nice place for a wedding because while we were there that afternoon, we saw not 1 but 2 weddings at Frankenstein's castle. That was sort of hilarious. And then we were on our way back on the Autobahn back to Munich, and looking at a map, I said, you know, it wouldn't be very far off our path to stop in this little town where my ancestors came from. Now, those of you who hear my stories, you're going to know more about my family than my family knows, because I feel absolutely compelled every time I'm going to go somewhere, especially if it's far away, to see if I have ancestors that came from there. So when we were going to go to Munich, I thought, wait, I have ancestors that came from Bavaria, but where? So it didn't take too much research to lead me to Andreas Gar, who left a little town in Bavaria in 1732 to come to the United States. Now in Bavaria, he was a shoemaker, a cordwainer. That's a person who makes fancy shoes. But by the time he got to Virginia, well, he'd endured a lot of trauma and trial, lost a few children along the way, and turned into a farmer. I don't know if that was happier for him or not, but in any case, that's what happened. And so I said, I believe that we can stop in the little town that the Gars came from. And the little town, the name of the town is Dinkelsbuhl. Yeah, isn't that crazy? Why would anybody name a town Dinkelsbuhl? Although we were just in England and we passed a sign that said that this way to Snitterlin. What? And you wonder just what they're going to do with the athletic groups, right? The Dinkelsbuhl Demons. It just doesn't sound that ferocious, does it? Anyway, so we stopped in Dinkelsbuhl, and as we were driving into this little town, I said to my daughter-in-law, I said, just Google that. And she said, what? Dinkelsbuhl? I said, no, Google cute Bavarian town. And so she did. Came right up. Oh, and the truth is, I tried it a couple of days ago, and it still comes right up. If you Google cute Bavarian town, you can test me on this, it's on all the lists. It is an adorable town. It's a medieval walled city, and the walls are still standing. It's got those half-timbered houses, beautiful cobblestone streets, and there in the center square on a wall is a mural depicting this legend from Dinkelsbuhl. Mercy, for your own child's sake, mercy. That was the cry of a teenage girl named Laura. You see, it was back in 1632, and that was, I'm sure, for all of you history aficionados, that was pretty much in the middle of the 30 Years' War. The 30 Years' War, that hardly registers with me, but it was a dreadful war, and it encompassed most of Europe. And in fact, at one point, they said 20% of the population of Germany died in the 30 Years' War. Wow. And in the corridor that was particularly involved in the fighting, 50%. 50%, if you can even imagine that. And what was the cause of the 30 Years' War? Well, like so many wars in the past and even now, it began over religion. It was the Catholics who were part of the Holy Roman Empire, which I'm sure you've always heard is neither holy nor Roman nor an empire, but it was that group against the Protestants of Northern Europe, you know, Martin Luther and all that. And so there was a clash that started with religion and turned into pretty much everything. And in that day, in 1632, there was an army, a Swedish army, laying siege to the little town of Dinkelsbuhl. Now, the army was led by a man named Colonel Speyruth, and he was known to be an excellent tactician and a hard man, very fierce and not used to giving much quarter. The Swedes were under the reign of Gustavus Adolphus, who had been preparing to be king since he was 6 years old. They just sort of folded him into all the things of the government, and so by the time he got to be king, he was ready. And he was ready to send out an army to take over everything. And so the message came from Colonel Speyruth. We want immediate and complete surrender. Or, well, all the people, the town's fathers in Dinkelsbuhl, they had to get together and talk it over. And at first, Colonel Speyruth had been willing to give a few concessions, like, we won't kill everybody, we won't burn all of your homes. But as the talks lengthened and lengthened and lengthened, he began to claw back those concessions, and still the talks went on. Now, one of the people that was involved in the talks was the gatekeeper. As I said, medieval walled city, 4 large gates, and the person who was controlling those gates was a person of some importance, and so he was involved in the talks. But who wasn't officially involved in the talks, but was able to overhear the talks, was the gatekeeper's daughter, Laura. And she heard something in the middle of those talks that gave her an idea. She heard the Swedish ambassador say that Colonel Speyruth was mourning the loss of a son. That gave her an idea, and she presented the idea to the council, and they said, oh, okay. It was a crazy idea, but nobody had a better idea, so they told her that she could try it out. And so Laura gathered up all the children of Dinkelsbuhl, and she led them to the gate where, just outside that gate, Colonel Speyruth and the Swedish army were encamped. They threw open the doors, and the colonel and his army came flooding in, and then they stopped, because in front of them were all the children of Dinkelsbuhl, with Laura in front, and a bunch of other townspeople behind the children. And that's when she looked at Colonel Speyruth and she said, "Mercy, for your own child's sake, mercy." And that stopped Colonel Speyruth long enough to survey the scene. And as he looked over those children, his glance paused on a little boy, blonde, blue-eyed, same size, about the same age as the child he had recently lost. And he paused looking at that little boy. And then he looked up at Laura. And then he looked past her to the other citizens of Dinkelsbuhl, and he said, "I will spare you. My men will not burn your city. Your children have been responsible for that. Never forget that your children saved your town." And then he turned around, and he and his men rode back out the gates of Dinkelsbuhl. And Dinkelsbuhl was spared. And I think that perhaps it has always been that way, that Dinkelsbuhl is meant to be a little island, an oasis of peace and calm in the midst of great strife all around. Because wars have come, as you well know, and Dinkelsbuhl has remained practically unscathed. Even the First and Second World War yielded no more damage in Dinkelsbuhl, but one window broken in one church. Wow. And so it was that the people of Dinkelsbuhl have remembered who saved their town. And so every year they have a big festival. It's called a Kinderzeche, which means a children's zeche is the bill that you would get at a restaurant. So it's their payment to the children for having saved the city. And everybody dresses up. Everybody takes the part of either a soldier or a citizen or one of the children or somebody in the band. Or they've got parts for everybody in fancy, fancy costumes. Of course, the plum parts are Laura and Colonel Speyruth. But at the end of this big, big celebration, the children of Dinkelsbuhl today, they know what they can look forward to. Well, peace. But probably something that means more to those children is each one of them gets a large paper cone filled with toys and chocolate. Wow. So that is the story of a legend of Dinkelsbuhl. And it put me in mind of a quotation about never forget that a small group of committed and thoughtful citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So if a group of children facing an army can bring peace to their town, what is it that we could do in combination with other citizens? Could we bring peace to our corner of the world? I hope so. Thank you.